right now joining us from NBC Sports Chicago, whose post and reporting with the Jerry Krause unpublished and final excerpt from his unpublished and unfinished memoirs, from which I was quoting liberally over the last 15 minutes. We appreciate Casey Johnson of NBC Sports Chicago joining us here on the Rich Eisen Show, a Bulls insider and somebody who's been covering this team for quite some time. How are you, Casey?
I'm well, Rich. How are you?
I'm doing fine. And my if you will, take on the final episode of The Last Dance was informed quite a bit from the fact that I read your post from over the weekend that Jerry Krause, in his memoir and his unpublished and unfinished memoir, put a lot of details on the end of the Bulls that may or may not have a bias to it. But it is something that I didn't hear last night. So I want to give you the floor here on this memoir and what you thought of the ending of last night's Last Dance.
Well, I was working for the Chicago Tribune back then. I covered the second three-peat along with several other writers for the Chicago Tribune. So I feel like I covered it from a journalistic aspect back then. I mean, I think when you have a breakup of a dynasty, there are multiple factors at play. There's no simple one black and white reason. I mean, there were multiple reasons why the run ended when it did. What I tried to do with these excerpts was just give Jerry a floor and give his perspective, his voice at a time when obviously he's not able to do so since he passed away in 2017. So this to me wasn't really journalism. This was more just kind of, throwing out his perspective. And he gave a very detailed reason why he felt the dynasty needed to break up. I thought that in terms of tying it to the documentary, Jerry Reinsdorf elucidated some of the same reasons. That basically they felt that with an aging core, to run it back would have been very expensive and not sure that it would have produced a championship given how, that 97-98 team had a feeling of finality to it. And I can say it, just having been around that team, covering it, I felt the same way. That team, to me, felt like a team that was kind of reaching its limit.
So why did the team get broken up, Casey? Why?
Well, I mean, that's like you said you have a 3-hour show. I mean,
right.
That's a 10-part documentary. I mean, it got broken up because Scottie Pippen was tired of being underpaid and dangled his trade bait. It got broken up because Phil Jackson and Jerry Krause's relationship had deteriorated to the point where Phil needed a break. It got broken up because the Bulls felt that Dennis Rodman was wayward and could not be reeled back in. He played 35 more games in the NBA over the next 2 seasons. It got broken up because Luke Longley's body was about to break down. It got broken up because Jerry Krause wanted the chance to rebuild and not bottom out, which unfortunately ended up happening. I mean, he really felt that's why he tried to trade Scottie Pippen in '97 to the Celtics to draft Tracy McGrady and Ron Mercer and kind of fast start the rebuild. Jerry Reinsdorf nixed that deal. So, when there's a break, dynasties are hard for a reason. They don't happen very often for a reason. And when there's that many strong personalities and people in play, it just kind of comes to an end. And I understand Michael's sentiment that he wanted to be taken away from him and lose it on the court. I understand that he's the ultimate competitor. That 98 conference finals against the Pacers was an incredibly tough series. So would have they been able to squeeze one more out? We'll never know. But I can tell you, just being around that 97-98 team, it had a feeling of finality to it.
Well, were you surprised then to see last night Jordan say that he would have run it back one more time, and that everybody would have, except that Scottie would need, as he said, some convincing, but he would have handled that? I mean, were you surprised to hear that last night?
No, it's not surprising at all because that's who Michael is. I mean, that's been that was abundantly clear then, and it's been made abundantly clear again with this documentary that Michael believes he can will things into existence. He's the greatest athlete and competitor I've ever been around and most people have ever seen. So of course he's going to believe that. I personally, I'm glad he at least acknowledged the difficulty of the Scottie thing, because I can tell you, the sense around the team was that Scottie was on the first train smoking, out of town. And when the lockout ended, he signed with the Rockets, and his agents came to the Bulls and asked to structure a sign trade so he could get paid more money, which the Bulls did, to give him a going-away present. So I think Scottie, look, he delayed the surgery before the 97-98 season. That was played on the documentary because he was just, angry, and there was a feeling that he was done, and Phil certainly was done. I mean, Phil said that in his books. He said that at the time. You can parse the reasons why he was done, but he also had a theory that you stay in one place for 7 years, and then the team needs a new voice. He used that theory with the Lakers as well, not just the Bulls. He stayed 9 with the Bulls because they kept winning championships. So, again, this is all, I get why this is all so fascinating and revisionist history, but, this was covered ad nauseum in 98, and it's just obviously being viewed through this prism of this documentary and the pandemic with which we're living in.
I know. And it was a remarkable documentary. Casey Johnson, NBC Sports Chicago, joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show, and everybody should check out the post that he had of the excerpt from Jerry Krause's unpublished, unfinished memoir describing why or how exactly the nuts and bolts. This is what I wanted to know last night, the exact dismantling of this team. And so what's the truth then? Jerry Krause telling Phil before the season, you can go 82-0, it doesn't matter, you're done. Or Krause saying in his unfinished, unpublished memoir that Phil said before the season, 8 months before the breakup meeting that Jerry Krause recounts, that Phil's the one who said, I need a break. I'm going to Montana, regardless of how this goes. What's the truth here?
Well, again, Rich, I mean, the truth to me is in the perspective, okay? So, this happened in the summer prior, too. I mean, the negotiations between Jerry Krause and Phil's agent, Todd Musburger, were so contentious that Jerry Reinsdorf had to fly to Montana and save the day just to bring Phil back for the 97-98 season. Phil signed 2 straight one-year deals in the summer of 96 and the summer of 97. So, I mean, it was hanging on by a thread. Jerry said that. It was on record. I mean, it was on camera. He said that comment about the 82-0. Their relationship had badly deteriorated. There's no getting around that. But at the end of the day, Jerry Reinsdorf, you can parse whether it was a genuine offer or not, but he offered Phil the opportunity in 98 to come back. Phil chose not to take it. And Phil is on record in his books and at the time then saying he's not going to take it. So, again, why did that happen? Partly because he felt he needed a break, partly because he felt like his theory of staying in place for 7 seasons had been extended to 9 seasons, and partly because of his deteriorating relationship with Jerry Krause. So there's no simple answer to any of this. The dynasty ran its course for multiple reasons. Everybody's got their own perspective as to why it happened. To me, the truth lies, kind of always in the middle.
So I guess let me use now I know why perhaps I didn't get a clear-cut answer at the end of the documentary last night, but I still wanted some sort of full-on nuts and bolts accounting similar to what I got here from Jerry Krause's memoir. So then let me ask you, Casey, to use the Few Good Men reference here, if Santiago was ordered not to be touched, why was he touched? Who ordered the code red? Who was the first one to say this is over? How did that happen after the last dance when Jerry says he went to Phil to say, let's do this one more time? And we obviously don't know the circumstances under that. He didn't mention the word rebuild in his conversation with Jason Hare on last night's documentary. Who was the one to basically say we're done now in Chicago?
Well, I mean, if you want a black and white answer, to me there isn't one. But if there is one, Phil said no. I mean, Jerry Reinsdorf offered him the chance to come back. He met with Michael in 98 before the lockout started and said, I think this is a long shot, but before you make a decision, let me talk to Phil. And he went to Phil and offered him a chance to come back, and Phil said, it's time. It's my time to go. He said that to us on the record as he pulled off on a motorcycle in the Berto Center parking lot. I was there. He said, it's my time to go. I'm not putting this on Phil, though, because you can understand why Phil got to the point that he did. It's a multi-layered answer is, I guess, what I'm trying to get at. But if you're asking what the domino is, Jerry Reinsdorf offered Phil Jackson the chance to return, and Phil said no. So you can, I mean, he in '97 he went out to Montana and had to save those negotiations to bring him back. He was successful in '97. He was not successful in '98. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my take on the proceedings.
No, I guess it does, but we just don't know the circumstances under which, I guess, did Phil and Michael ever have a conversation where Phil's just like, yeah, we can only come back if it's you and no Scottie, and I don't know what's left with Rodman. You know, like that's the sort of stuff I wanted to hear. You know, Kukoc was still there, like you and Kukoc and me, you know, in a season that I don't know if it's going to happen. You know, like I would love to be a fly on that wall if that conversation ever took place, Casey, you know?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And that's why, you know, to me, I was actually talking to somebody else who said, you know, is there another documentary? I said, you could do a 10-part documentary on just the breakup of the dynasty. I mean, I feel like as great as this film was, it was, you know, ultimately it was more of a history lesson and to me more of a Jordan documentary. I'm not saying that critically. It was wonderful filmmaking. It was captivating watch and certainly needed in this time we're all living in. But, you know, to me, it just really kind of got to the breakup at the very end. I think you could do, you know, maybe not 10 hours, but certainly multiple hours on that. And some of these questions you're asking, you know, I would like to know some of the answers to them too. I feel like I reported it pretty closely back then, but now you're taking me back to question some of the stuff that happened back then. I don't know if Phil and you don't know what kind of private conversations took place back then in terms of, hey, what are you going to do? Hey, what are you going to do? Hey, what are you going to do? I mean, Michael was pretty adamant that he could have got the band back together. Never put anything past Michael Jordan.
No doubt.
We all know that.
Oh, no doubt. Casey Johnson, NBC Sports Chicago here on the Rich Eisen Show. A few more minutes left with him. How about the revelation that it wasn't the flu game, it was the food poisoning game? Did you learn that for the first time last night too, Casey?
We knew it was bad pizza, so we that's been written about for years. So that was not new to me. I mean, the 5 delivery guy, Tim Grover, was quoted in an ESPN article in 2012 as saying that. I'm not sure that they were like, you know, pulling out a bottle of hemlock and dousing the pizza with it. That might be a little too conspiracy theorist for my taste, but no, we knew we've known it was pizza for years. You know, I didn't learn much in this because I was, you know, I consider myself kind of a Bulls historian.
Yep.
I've been around the franchise for a long time. I did not know about Jordan playing golf with Bill Gaines before the 63-point game, and I loved that anecdote. And I did not know about the Brian Russell story until if I did know it, I forgot it, about how Brian kind of dissed him when he went to retire and go play baseball. So I had forgotten that one. I don't know. Maybe Michael made that one up like he made up the LeBron. You never know, right?
Yeah,
you never know.
I know, because Russell didn't sit down. It seems like Stockton was the only Jazz to sit down. And I saw, too, that, you know, people, you know, obviously Twitter, there's trolls saying that, you know, that Karl Malone didn't sit down for this, that there's hard feelings, whatever. How about the footage of him going on the bus and shaking hands with Jordan?
Cool.
You know, the exact opposite of the Pistons. Never shaking Jordan's hands after losing to Jordan on the court. And this guy, after getting denied a second time, went onto the bus, found him, and shook his hand. That was something to me.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. I actually really liked, Rich, episodes 9 and 10 because I thought there was a little bit more of the behind-the-scenes footage. You had that wonderful anecdote where Jordan's talking smack to Larry Bird after the '98 conference finals. And, you know, obviously we're in the business, how, you know, you see those behind-the-scenes, like how the sausage is made, guys waiting for their press conference turn in the bowels of the stadium, and just the banter between them. I thought that stuff was fantastic last night. And I also enjoyed your star turn, by the way, a very young Rich.
That was something.
The lead here, but
that was something.
That was good stuff.
That was good stuff. And by the way, you are an excellent wordsmith, clearly, Casey, when you referred to what Michael said to Bird as, quote unquote, a wonderful anecdote. That's one way to put it. That is one way to describe what we saw. You know?
There are other ways to put it as well.
Oh my gosh, that's the ultimate, you know what, into chicken salad that you just made right there. Yeah, so it was remarkable. And, you know, I just wanted a definitive answer at the end of this. And the fact that we still did not get one makes me think that it's got to be out there somewhere, that there is a morsel on the floor that we have not placed in front of us. You know, then the question is they you know, in a shortened season the next year, if they had run it back, you know, if they had run it back, they could have won a fourth in a row and a seventh out of 9. Casey?
Well, I'll close with this. It's like you know, now we're playing the holy what if game because, you know, also Michael suffered a pretty serious injury during the lockout with the cigar cutter, sliced the tendon in his finger. He, you know, obviously he's probably not. Maybe he's not going to be using a cigar cutter in the Bahamas if he knows the team's getting run back during the lockout. Maybe he is. So now you're speculating on other things. I mean, Michael's availability would have been in question for the full 98-99 season with that cigar cutter injury. So again, another layer to it. Sounds like I got a little bit more reporting to do from 22 years ago.
I don't know. I just wanted an answer. I thought that we were going to get it. It's not the fault of Jason Hare. It's just that again, I thought that by the end of this, like the last half hour, last 45 minutes would be all about the relitigation of the end game here. Certainly, since everybody was sat down, pretty much, for the exception of Krause. And I'm appreciative that you got this last question for you. How did you get your hands on the Krause memoir that was unpublished, unfinished, Casey?
Well, I covered him for 6 seasons for the Chicago Tribune, and then when he left the Bulls in 2003, I gave him some space and Tony hooked up with him to do like an exit interview, which was a painful day for him because he loved the job so much. And from that story, just a trust built. And then when he returned to his first love of baseball scouting, which he did for the last 14 years of his life or 13 years of his life, just kind of a natural friendship formed. I was no longer professionally obligated to cover him. He was someone who was very curious and wanted to stay in the game of basketball. He would call me. We would talk on the phone constantly. He was someone who just wanted somebody to listen to him, and listening is what I do for a living. So a friendship just kind of naturally formed, and I've gotten to know his family very well, and they were incredibly gracious to share these writings with me. Again, I didn't view them as journalism. I viewed them as just throwing them out there and giving somebody a voice at a time when he was not able to offer that.
Well done, Casey. At KCJ Hoop for anybody that wants to see the memoir that I'm referring to, or follow anything that Casey Johnson is doing. Really appreciate this conversation, Casey. Thank you. Appreciate you calling in.
I enjoyed it, Rich. Take care, man. Thanks.
Right back at you. You got it. That's Casey Johnson. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.